Really good growth in the quarter, 9%, 9% on a constant currency basis. Strong growth in our network infrastructure business, largely off the back of our optical networks business. Continued strong order growth, so we feel very good about that. And then I think on our mobile infrastructure portfolio, if you think about CNS, good growth there in what is a more stable market. So we believe we took share in that business and continue to take share with our cloud-driven portfolio, and then stable growth in mobile networks and just continued solid execution in Nokia Technologies. So very pleased on that front. And then, of course, when you look at a year-over-year basis, as you touched on profit, last year we had a reversal that we had in the year, so the profit looks a little bit more favorable last year when you compare it to this year. But when you remove that reversal, we're actually on a year-over-year basis flat. And I think that, given some of the changes we're making in the business, the investments we're making to capture the opportunity with optical and the integration of Infinera, as we've touched on in the past, I'm really pleased with how the team has executed across the company this quarter.
Some of the changes you're making to the business, where you're directing investment, clearly there's big focus on AI and data centers and capitalizing on the demand we're seeing in that space. Just give us some color, if you can, around what you're seeing as far as demand for AI and data center activity goes.
Yep. In terms of the AI supercycle, which I've touched on, there's tremendous demand around the network build out. And if you look at optical, the optical demand is across all sectors. So obviously the long haul transport, subsea transport, long haul transport, what we do in metro networks, which has been well documented, those markets are growing. And then the really exciting part for us is the emerging demand we're seeing in pluggables. And we're now in market shipping our 800 gig ZR Plus pluggable. That's the technical definition for our platform. But we're in market with that product, which is competitive from a technology standpoint. We're obviously continuing to innovate, and we're just, as I said, we're continuing to see order momentum. So we feel very good about that business. On IP network, we had some good wins in the quarter, but again, in that space, we're IP switching. We're not as far along in that market in terms of our footprint and share. So that's a place where I think it's early days for us, but excited about the prospects and the opportunity.
Yeah, Justin, a lot of really interesting stuff you said to Juliana there as well. I just want to revisit, though, this point about AI. And you say AI and data center demand continues to be robust. In fact, it continues to accelerate from our perspective as well, you said in a call with reporters. I mentioned this to another CEO in Scandinavia yesterday who's very exposed to data center demand as well. Are you concerned that after this current wave of spending from the hyperscalers, actually it's going to become a much, much slower market, and therefore you don't want to put too much resource into that area?
Yeah, Steve, I'm really not. I think, first of all, when you look at the longer term potential of AI, I think this is as I've said, I think this is a super cycle. I think this is a secular growth trend for many years. And the reason I say that is if you look at what we're doing in AI today, we're largely using LLMs for language-based applications. Autonomous vehicles are still in the early days of penetration. Augmented and virtual reality, smart glasses, very low penetration. Robotics, very low penetration. There's so many applications to come that I think we're very much in the early days. The other thing I would say is there's been a lot of discussion around bubbles, but I think this view is also tends to be a little bit short term. If you go back to the cloud build, if you think about the cloud build, we've always had periods of growth and digestion. Yes, we had a bubble in the internet, but even if you look at that over a 2 or 3 or 5 year period, you see that bubble burst, and then you see tremendous growth well above where the bubble was. And I think this is going to, it's hard for me to predict what exactly will happen in AI on a quarter or 1 year basis, but I think the long-term prospects are massive. And as I've said before, it's happening today in our fixed infrastructure business because of the data center build out. I think it's going to drive more demand in our fixed access business and fiber as we see expansion there. We're now releasing 50 gig passive optical network technology, so we can support enterprises with fiber as well as residential customers. And then it's going to move to mobile networks as a lot of these devices, autonomous vehicles, robotics, smart glasses, other applications become more and more in demand and more penetrated in the market.